want, to some extent, to see what's next, or you want to even just have an idea of what's next, because this sure isn't it. It can't be it. Good morning to you. Good Monday morning. I'm Dejan Kovacevic of DK Pittsburgh Sports, and this is Daily Shot of Penguins. It comes your way bright and early every weekday if you're into football and or baseball. I also offer daily shots of Steelers and Pirates. I hope you'll check those out as well. The Penguins broke, I don't even know how long that losing streak was. Was it 4? Something like that, 3 or 4? They started to kind of blur together, but whatever it was, they somewhat, quasi bounced back from a hideous loss in Columbus that I covered out there to beat the Sharks. And even then, they blew a 3-goal lead. They blew a 3-goal lead to San Jose and managed to squeak it out in the shootout, 4-3. Been asking this one a lot lately. Gonna ask it again today. What are we doing here? What is this? Because I'll tell you what it isn't. It isn't contention. It isn't even competitive. So the apparent purpose to this whole exercise, the approach that Kyle Dubas, Mike Sullivan, and everybody else took coming into this season, meaning, get Sid back into the playoffs, for lack of a more overarching way to word that, this isn't it. Similarly, if the objective, or even part of the objective, was to bring along young players, make sure that they're not rushed, but that they're ready. When they are ready in the AHL, bring them up. Start injecting some of those young legs and young attitudes and fresh, happy faces into the nightly lineup. Watch the energy level rise. Watch the hope factor rise. This isn't that either, before you thought I was about to say something complimentary about Owen Pickering. Don't get me wrong, Pickering had a really nice debut. If you think Pickering's made this roster as a result of that nice debut, you haven't been paying attention to this team for quite some time. Because the way this sort of thing works is the way it worked in Columbus, when Pickering and Vasily Ponomarev were called up and then told to come and sit with me in the press box, while the team goes out there on the ice and loses to the Blue Jackets 6-2, right after the Blue Jackets had lost a half-dozen games in a row themselves. While out on the ice, the one player more than any other who competed like a madman all over the rink, Jesse Puljujarvi, was limited to 11 minutes and 50 seconds of ice time. You can attribute that, if you'd like, to a lack of special teams duty, and that would be somewhat fair, except that you can also put him on the power play when the power play isn't doing anything, and it didn't do anything for the better part of this particular evening. This episode is brought to you by Bet Online, your number one source for all your summer sports needs this season, from Major League Baseball, golf, NHL, NBA playoffs. Get the latest odds and lines, including all team matchups, player props, odds on just about everything that's out there. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to get in on the action. Bet Online, where the game starts. So you have a player who's doing really well. You have a new line that you just put together, moving Drew O'Connor to center for the first time in his NHL career. He's done it in other walks of life. And Sam Poulin, your former top pick that you want to finally get a really good look at, and you put these three guys together, and for the first couple of periods, Puljujarvi and O'Connor played well. Then Sam started to join them. I feel like Sam started to find some footing there, especially in the third period. This, again, is in Columbus. And, well, and I know that it won't last, that it won't be held together, and in fact that they might not even stay in the lineup, because Kevin Hayes is going to be back soon. And Matt Nieto just returned from a long absence. Both are in their mid-30s. And I'm not cutting up either. Okay? I don't have a problem with either one of them. and what they can contribute to an already deep hockey team. It just doesn't, none of this makes sense. None of this makes sense. Pickering's here. Pickering did get into the lineup against the Sharks. Pickering should have displaced Matt Grzelcyk, who's been terrible and who was terrible again in Columbus and terrible again against San Jose. I have no earthly idea what they see in him, and yes, I've asked, and no, the answers are not satisfactory because I still happen to have functioning eyeballs. Not to mention easy and free access to advanced analytics that will illustrate that no defenseman anywhere in the NHL has been on the ice at 5-on-5 for more high-danger scoring chances against than Grzelcyk. How much deeper do you want me to take that analysis? And he's been anointed as a top-pairing guy, not just in the lineup, top pairing, out there with Chris Letang usually. He's been on the top power play. He's been out there with the first penalty kill guys. He's been out there to start games behind Sid. And you'd better believe that when someone else happens to come back into the lineup, like Ryan Graves, who was made a healthy scratch over the weekend, I believe because of a lack of net front work in Columbus. At least that's what I heard out there. In general, he's been okay, and if he makes his way back into the lineup this week against, oh boy, you know who they're playing this week? The Lightning and the Jets. Tampa Bay has been pretty good and really good of late, and Winnipeg's only been the best team in the NHL. When Graves makes his way back, you're going to see a similar priority. Somebody has to come out. Who do you take out? You're going to take out the kid because that's what he does. That's what Mike Sullivan does, and that's what Dubas allows, and the conversation just keeps spiraling. You're going to ask, who's at fault? You're going to ask, well, doesn't Dubas have say over Sullivan? Of course he does. Or doesn't Sullivan have that night's lineup? Well, of course he does. It's never that simple. It's never that cut and dried. Ultimately, what you'd want is not one person seeing this the same way. You'd want both of them to see it the same way. You'd want both of them to say, look at this awful thing we've got going here. I just brought you Pickering and Panamara from a team in Wilkes-Barre that's playing really well. These guys individually are playing really well. Let's get them in there tonight. Nah. When we come back, J1Q. Today's J1Q comes from Dan, who says, DK, I always thought getting rid of Mikael Granlund was at least something good from the Erik Carlson trade, but seeing his play over the weekend versus 65, is it possible that the Sharks won the Carlson trade? You know, I don't even remember who all was involved in that trade. It obviously wasn't just Granlund going in that direction. There were a bunch of contracts being eaten. There was a prospect that went to Montreal. Didn't Nathan Legare go there? But I wouldn't take the concept too far. Granlund scored a really nice shootout goal the other night and played the kind of game that we'd become accustomed to seeing from him when he was with the Wild. He wasn't that at all with the Penguins. Now, some of that does have to do with the Mike Sullivan system. You have to have a certain level of speed in order to contend for pucks on the forecheck and that sort of thing. But man, when Carlson is even, 60% of his best self, he does things on the rink that other people can't do. And I know nobody wants to hear anything remotely resembling a positive syllable about him right now, but he's capable of a lot more than this. He's now 20 games into the schedule, so I'd say it's really late to be bringing up that he had a slow start due to whatever that issue was that he had all through training camp, whether it was, injury, illness, whatever. We're way past citing that thing. I'm mentioning it only to explain maybe his first handful of games. Now, for what it's worth, I happen to think that Carlson was better over the weekend, meaning better than he's been. He certainly seemed more focused on taking care of the defensive side than he'd been in the recent past, but I'm kind of damning him with faint praise by comparing this Carlson to the one from a week ago. And here again, I can ask the question that's going to probably become my recurring theme on this program, and that's, what are you doing here? In general, what are they doing? And what are the Penguins going to do? Because that Carlson contract, and remember, that was not the main motivation. It was the only motivation the Sharks had for moving him. They were ready to do anything they could just to have the contract out. And the reason for that is that he's 34 and he still has 2 years beyond the current one with an $11.5 million cap hit, the highest on the roster. I'm going to remind everybody, Ron Hextall didn't make that trade. That was Kyle Dubas. So this isn't one of the many cases where you can say Hextall really hamstrung Dubas. Hextall is the one who's responsible for this still. Did Hextall bring in Granlund? Yeah, but Granlund's up after this season. Whereas we're still going to be talking about this Carlson contract for a long time, and he's got a complete no movement clause on top of all that. So, yeah. I appreciate the question. I appreciate the spirit with which it was asked, and I appreciate everybody listening to Daily Shot of Penguins. We're going to do another one of these tomorrow.